This is your room. You're safe in this compartment. We're 1,300 meters down. Nothing will interrupt you here. If you'd like, I can tell you what happened during the last dive. It's a little strange, but sometimes it helps. It helps me too. 3 weeks ago, one of my drones sent back a signal we couldn't decrypt. It wasn't coordinates. It was something else. I've spent the last 9 years working with unmanned underwater vehicles, UUVs, drones, crawlers, gliders, anything that can survive where humans aren't meant to go. Places where the pressure would crush a steel barrel flat, squeezing it like paper. Places we don't send people anymore, not since the incident in the Kurils. Most of the time, it's boring work, tedious. Long hours staring at sonar scans and drop camera feeds, waiting for something, anything, to move across the screen. But sometimes you see things that don't belong. Things the textbooks don't prepare you for. I keep folders of those clips, not for the money, but for my own sanity. To remind myself I didn't imagine them. One clip still bothers me. A crawler drifted past a rock field off Tonga Ridge. Only one of the rocks blinked. Not a fish, not bioluminescence. A mechanical blink. Full iris contraction tracked the camera and then went still. We played it back frame by frame, filed it under sensor error, and 2 weeks later, the entire system was wiped in a firmware patch we didn't request. You learn not to ask questions, but you don't forget. This job, this contract, started with a dead email address. No signature, no logo, no indication of who sent it. Just a subject line that said, Remote Operations Specialist Required, Tier 4 Clearance Preferred. There was a phone number and a GPS coordinate near the Aleutian chain. No description, no budget, no attached scope of work. Normally I'd mark something like that as phishing and delete it. But this one came with a one-time access code to a private satellite uplink. I had to know what it was about. Curiosity always kills me slowly. The offer: $225,000 for a 6-week deployment, NDA bound, required skill set, long-range drone ops, oceanic cartography, fault zone familiarity, and dream analysis. That last line caught me off guard. I thought it was a typo. I sent back one word: available. 48 hours later, I was on a chartered flight out of Fairbanks in the middle of the night. No ticket, no paperwork, no TSA. Just a nondescript guy in airport cargo uniform who handed me a thermal suit and told me to turn off my phone. I haven't seen that phone since. We flew low over the coastline, out into black water, and landed on a runway that didn't exist on any map. The fog was so thick, it looked like we were touching down on a cloud. Someone opened the cabin door, and the wind hit like it was trying to tear the skin off my face. A black SUV was already waiting. No plates. The driver never spoke, not once in 2 hours. He didn't even nod. I watched him through the side mirror. His eyes didn't move, not once, even through winding roads and ice patches. Like he wasn't actually driving. By the time we reached the harbor, dawn was just a pale bruise behind the clouds. That's when I saw the ship for the first time, the Summerlead. It wasn't docked. It hovered in the fog like a ghost, tethered to a floating supply platform, with no port infrastructure, no registration lights, no country of origin. Just steel and shadow and floodlights that never pointed toward shore. There was no greeting, no handshakes, just cold silence. A hydraulic lift raised me up the hull and onto the deck. The air smelled like iodine and rubber, fresh paint and sterilized equipment. Everything was new but not inviting. The crew wore dark coveralls with no insignias, and the only markings on the vessel were numerical grid codes stenciled near every hatch. It felt less like a ship, more like a sealed protocol. My duffel bag was taken before I could protest. Someone pressed a tablet into my hands with a glowing notification. Operator, Revik, Kevrik. Quarters, B3C, status, cleared. Briefing in 2 HRS. Rest cycle. 12:30, 4:30 only. There was no signature, no welcoming committee, not even a manual. The interior of the Summerled was colder than I expected. Purposefully cold. Like it wasn't built for humans, but for machines. The walls weren't steel. They were carbon layer composite, covered in matte black insulation panels, some with exposed sensors embedded in them. Many of them tracked movement with a faint hiss. None of them blinked green. There were cameras everywhere. Not for security. Wrong angles for that. More like observation. Like we were the subjects. And not just from inside. Some of the cameras were angled upward, watching the ceiling like they were waiting for something to come through it. My quarters were exactly what you'd expect from a ship that didn't want you to get comfortable. One bed, no windows, a built-in sink with auto-sterilization, and a motion-triggered light that blinked whenever I moved too fast. The mattress was the same kind used in surgical recovery units, pressure absorbent, no softness. On the desk was a red envelope, thick paper, like something from a hotel in the 1960s. Inside, a card, do not discuss coordinates, do not record audio, do not initiate unscheduled transmissions, no signature, no context. The air inside the room was completely still. Not quiet, still. I tested the vent with a lighter. No movement. I wasn't sure if there even was airflow. By the time I made my way to the designated operations room, I was starting to feel like I'd signed up for something much deeper than ocean work. Something older. Compartment C2 was nothing like a standard ops bay. It felt like the control room of a private observatory, or maybe the cockpit of something that was never meant to fly. Low ceilings, sound-dampening foam. 5 pods, arranged like teeth in a jawline, each with a fixed chair, dual monitors, adjustable joystick control, and biometric locks. On the back wall, a full-width LED panel displayed a rotating 3D topography of the ocean floor. But it wasn't labeled with depth lines or navigation references, just a rotating wireframe marked with zones. One stood out, highlighted in pulsing red, Zeta Sector, Grid A7, no entry. I didn't ask questions. Within minutes, others arrived. There was a tall guy with glacier blue eyes and a limp he didn't try to hide. His badge said Dr. Lyndon Cross, Systems Interface. He didn't smile, just nodded once, then sat at the second pod without turning on the display. Then a woman in her 30s, maybe Eastern European, with a face like she didn't blink often. She wore headphones, but no sound was playing. Her badge said Irina Havel, Neurotelemetry. I wasn't sure what that even meant in the context of deep-sea drones. She smelled faintly of burned plastic. Then finally, the mission lead, Dr. Morgan Teal. He walked in like someone who just had a one-way conversation with a classified file. Tall, wiry, crisp posture. He didn't introduce himself, just tapped the big screen and began speaking like we were in the middle of an ongoing meeting we'd all forgotten. 5 months ago, Unit V-22 was deployed to survey underwater thermal anomaly clusters off the northwest trench wall. Its signal terminated 19 minutes after entering Grid A7. No mechanical fault detected. No communications prior to signal loss. 4 days later, we began receiving burst transmissions, compressed, encrypted, staggered, originating from a coordinate that no longer exists on public charts. He paused, letting that hang in the air like a knife tip. Since then, we've received 46 unique data packets, all from the same signal header, all using V-22's onboard ID. I blinked. That wasn't possible. Sir, I said carefully, those drones don't transmit post-shutdown. If the command link goes down, you'd need physical retrieval to reinitiate handshake. Thiel gave me a look that was hard to read. Half challenge, half pity. Correct, he said. Unless the drone isn't the one initiating the signal. That made everyone quiet. I felt my throat tighten. What do the transmissions contain? I asked. Thiel turned back to the display. Unknown. Packet contents are encrypted in a format we haven't been able to decode. Not compression, not signal drift. The encryption structure itself is non-Euclidean, a term usually reserved for impossible geometries, not data. That last word was out of place. Non-Euclidean usually describes shapes, not data. I leaned back in my chair, trying to decide if I was part of some elaborate tech experiment or something stranger. Thiel continued. Your job, Operator Rivik, is to pilot V-29 into the last known vector path of V-22. Attempt remote rehandshake. Initiate tether deployment if instructed. Do not enter grid A7 without command clearance. He paused. And if the signal starts transmitting again, don't answer it. I spent the first day trying to map the ship in my head. Not because anyone asked me to, but because it didn't make sense. I'd worked vessels this size before. I knew the general layout of deep-sea research ships: command deck forward, ops midship, drone bays aft, engineering lower stern. But the Summerlead didn't follow that logic. Some corridors turned where they shouldn't. Others looped back too soon or didn't connect to where they should have. On 2 occasions, I passed the same gray fire door twice without making a turn. A few sections had no lighting at all. One hallway, narrow and lined with sealed pipes, was marked Zone 6B, even though no such zone appeared on the internal schematic. Another, colder and lower to the waterline, was labeled Dry Compartment, OBS. That one had a keypad panel with no numbers, just 8 white squares that pulsed faintly like gills. When I touched them, they stopped blinking, then started again. I didn't try a second time. At breakfast, if you could call it that, I asked a systems tech how many decks the ship had. He looked at me like I'd just asked how many Mondays were in a year. 5, he said. Then more uncertainly, I think we launched V-29 that night. Weather was stable, swells were low. The ship never drifted. Dynamic positioning kept us locked over the same coordinate like a pin stuck into the Earth's skin. Cross handled the drone prep, while I ran pre-dive diagnostics. Every system passed. Thruster alignment, signal integrity, pressure seals, pitch ballast, biofilter on the sample scoops. There was a slight desync in the left arm servo, but it auto-corrected before launch. Depth target 9600, I said into the intercom. Confirmed, said Thiel from the command station. V-29 slid into the water with mechanical grace, its hull cutting clean through the surface without a splash. The drone descended at a controlled rate, 0.8 meters per second, until it vanished from surface sonar. After that, we tracked by mid-band telemetry and sonar triangulation. I've piloted dozens of these things, but V-29 moved differently. Not smoother, not faster, just more aware. The way it adjusted for microcurrents before they hit, or how it rotated its sensor pod as if preemptively tracking something not yet visible. Is there passive predictive modeling running? I asked. Irina glanced up from her station. No, at least not officially. The drone passed 3,000 meters, then 6,000, then 9,000. The water grew darker, heavier. Light doesn't fade down there. It collapses, gets folded inward. The ROV floodlights painted only fragments of the surrounding terrain, folds of sediment, collapsed ridges, long scars where tectonic shifts had pulled the crust apart like torn paper. Approaching target shelf, I said. Thiel didn't respond. V-29's main camera caught a ridge wall that shouldn't have been there, at least not based on the bathymetry model we were given. It rose almost vertically, like a broken tooth, covered in filament-like growths that pulsed faintly in infrared. Organic, synthetic, could have been both, or neither. The drone slowed without command. Manual override engaged. I said aloud, though no one else had touched the stick. I recentered the controls and continued along the survey path. No alert was raised. That night, I reviewed the dive footage twice in my quarters, frame by frame. No obvious interference, no corrupted packets, just strangeness. Subtle shifts in perspective, as if the terrain moved between frames. Not drift, something else. At one point, a cluster of bubbles drifted upward from an unseen fissure. Nothing odd, except they moved too slowly, not like gas, like they were being pulled back. I zoomed in and froze a single frame. One bubble, perfectly spherical, contained a faint grid pattern. It wasn't light refraction, it was structure, something with symmetry. I didn't log it. On the third day, time began to fold. I woke from what felt like a 2-hour nap. The lights in my quarters were off, the tablet by my bed was blank, and my watch said it was 1840, nearly 2 hours after I should have been on deck. I jumped up, dressed, and ran to the ops room. No one said a word when I entered. Everyone was already seated staring at screens. When I apologized, Teal just blinked once and said, "You've been here the whole time." I thought he was joking, until Irina nodded in agreement. I checked the surveillance feed from the corridor later. There I was, sitting at my station, unmoving, hands folded, eyes open, for 112 minutes. I had no memory of it. After the memory lapse, I started tracking myself. Not officially, just analog. I tore a page from a maintenance log, kept it in my pocket, scribbled timestamps, actions. Wrote what I could remember every half hour. I expected to find errors in time. What I found instead was repetition, same hallway, same exact steps, same comments from passing crew. At 16:10, 2 days in a row, a technician in orange gloves passed me whistling something atonal. Same tempo, same pitch. The third day, I waited by the bulkhead to catch him. He never came. The whistling continued anyway. I stopped trying to rationalize it. We ran another deployment run, this time into the southern flank of the ridge. V-29 behaved nominally. But when I pulled up the passive acoustic feed, I caught something, barely a whisper, at the edge of the spectrum. Not a whale call, not machinery. Something like water learning to speak. "Boost channel," I said to Irina. She hesitated. "Already did," she said quietly. I looked over. Her hands were clenched. On her screen, a live neural filter output. The signal had been converted into waveforms. The shape was wrong, not language, not music. Something closer to architecture, a structure made of tone. Before I could ask more, Cross cut the feed. "Forget it," he said. "It's nothing. Deep water plays tricks." But I saw his hand. It was shaking. Later that night, I found a line of moisture under my bed. A small, briny trail, just a few inches long, like seawater had condensed under the frame. I swabbed it, ran it through the salinity scanner in maintenance. The result came back, NaCl level, 3.9%. That's higher than surface ocean, more like ancient water, buried aquifer, or deep brine reservoir. But we hadn't been anywhere near such zones. I didn't report it. Instead, I watched the night log. And that's when I saw her, Irina, standing alone in corridor G4. A 12 hours. Lights off, no audio, just standing. Still, looking into a blackened window on a sealed bulkhead. Then she raised her hand, slowly, deliberately, touched the glass. There was nothing on the other side, just void. She whispered something and the feed cut out. When I asked her about it the next day, she smiled. Not warmly, just mechanically. "Don't look directly at them," she said, then walked away. That same day, V-29 performed an unauthorized maneuver. During an otherwise routine survey loop, the drone adjusted pitch and yaw, aimed its primary camera due west, and began a slow pan across empty trench. No command had been issued. "Manual override," I said, but the control stick was already dead. No haptic, no resistance. The drone wasn't responding. Then came the signal, not from us, not from V-29. It came from V-22's frequency header. "Impossible," I whispered. The packet hit our systems hard, flashing red in 3 terminals before firewalls kicked in. Irina flinched like she'd been slapped. Her console rebooted. Mine froze, then slowly began playing something in the center monitor. At first, just noise. Grain, pulse, static. Then structure, a swirling grid. Not animated, not flickering, just a living stasis. Something that vibrated without moving, something wrong with depth perception. The longer I looked, the more I felt my vision pushing into the screen instead of receiving from it. Cross killed the feed. Thiel stood up. For the first time, he looked unsettled. "That's enough," he said. No one argued. I stayed awake that night, not because I was afraid of what might happen, but because I wasn't entirely sure it hadn't already. Something had shifted. The ship felt quieter, the walls closer, my own thoughts thinner. I checked my pulse. It was normal. The lights in my quarters blinked once, paused, then stayed dark for 4 full seconds, long enough to feel observed. The next morning, the motion sensor in my cabin logged activity from 03:11 to 03:15. I hadn't moved. The footage was gone. System claimed no recording available for that window, not corruption, not deletion, just absence, as if it had never been on. I asked one of the maintenance guys if the system ever goes dark. He shrugged. "Only during handovers." "What handovers?" But he was already walking away. In the ops room, Irina had reconfigured her interface. One screen showed a scrolling matrix of dream state telemetry, REM phase traces, cortical synchronization indexes. I wasn't sure whose they were. "You analyzing sleep patterns now?" I asked. "Only the ones that echo," she said without looking up. "What do you mean, echo?" But she didn't answer. Her headphones were on, but I didn't hear anything coming from them. She sat there, absolutely still, eyes tracking something I couldn't see. I went to check on V-29's previous telemetry log. The file existed, but its header now listed a second operator ID. Not mine. Not anyone on the manifest. Just a blank field that scrolled when I hovered over it, like a name was too long to display. I tried exporting it to external media. The system rejected the request. Transfer denied, origin uncertain. Origin, not destination. At Shotu 47 that night, something tapped on the outside of my cabin wall, just once, clean, hollow, as if from inside the metal itself. I waited. No second tap came. When I opened the door, the hallway was dark. The corridor lights were flickering in a way I hadn't seen before, not broken, just subtly wrong. A rhythm without a pattern. I stepped out and turned toward the stairwell. On the wall just past the junction, someone had scratched something into the black insulation. Not written, scratched. 3 vertical lines, 2 horizontal through them. Not English, not a language, just presence. I left it there. The briefing Thiel promised came late. He called it a clarification of mission scope, but it felt more like a recalibration. It happened in compartment D1, a room we hadn't used before. No windows, no screens. Just a white table under a hanging bulb that hummed too high for comfort. One chair for each of us, Irina, Cross, myself. No one else. Thiel didn't sit. He started with a question. How much of the bathymetry do you believe? It wasn't rhetorical. He waited. Cross cleared his throat. Depends on the source. Correct, Thiel said. Depends who charted it. Depends what was filtered. Most deep-sea maps aren't raw scans. They're reconstructions. The ocean doesn't like to be photographed. He placed a folder on the table. Inside, 5 laminated images, high-res sonar composites. At first glance, just more trench wall and fault topography. But the deeper you looked, the more wrong they became. One showed a curvature that folded inward, like a canyon looped inside itself. Another depicted what looked like structure, artificial symmetry layered beneath erosion strata. These aren't public, Thiel said. They're pulled from fragmented scans stitched together across decades. Every time someone gets too close, equipment fails. We send drones, they go blind. We send more, some don't come back. He slid the 5th image forward. I didn't understand it at first, just noise. Dense, layered noise like the raw pattern of an interferometer or a corrupted seafloor imprint. Then I turned it upside down. It was a face, not a human face, not animal either, something in between, flattened ratios. No eyes, just orbitals. Cheek structure like it had grown under gravity different from ours. Pareidolia, Cross muttered, but without conviction. Thiel didn't disagree. Maybe, but it shows up in 3 separate surveys 20 years apart. Same coordinates, same formation. The ridge moves, but that doesn't. I spoke before I could stop myself. So what are we doing here? Thiel finally looked at me. Really looked. We're listening. Something down there has started talking. No one said a word. After the meeting, we were confined to shipboard zones. No more drifting off route. No more exploring off-path corridors. A security team was posted outside the comms bay. Not in uniform, but obvious enough. One of them carried a sidearm. I hadn't seen weapons on the ship before. The hallway to the lower labs was sealed off. Structural instability, they said. But later that night, the log showed Thiel entering it. I started checking the manifest again. Not the public one. Our local node had a cache of login credentials, and one of the auxiliary user shells hadn't pinged the network in over a week. Its ID was redacted. No name. But it had logged access to drone telemetry, acoustic scans, neural loopback protocols, and cabin-level surveillance. The timestamps didn't make sense. Some of them were in the future. I tried to cross-reference the drone control logs. Something had changed there too. V-29's system clock now had 2 independent counters. One followed mission time. The other didn't count up. It counted down. It had less than 4 days remaining. I didn't tell the others, not yet. Instead, I ran an unauthorized system sweep using a legacy patch we used during fault analysis back on the Tethys contract. The diagnostic was slow but honest. It showed 94% system integrity. But that missing 6%, it wasn't marked as corrupted. It was labeled reassigned. To what? It didn't say. Later that night, I found Cross in the maintenance alcove outside the ballast station. He wasn't working. He was just standing, not quite idle. He was staring at something. A bulkhead panel had been removed, exposing a cross-section of cabling I didn't recognize. Not fiber, not copper. Something darker, organic-looking, coiled like nerves instead of wires. I stepped beside him. Engineering work, he didn't respond, just pointed. Where the lines disappeared into the wall, the insulation was seared. Not burnt, disintegrated in a perfect spiral, like something had rotated through the panel without touching it. I reached out instinctively, but he caught my wrist. "Don't," he said. "We don't own this circuit." Before I could ask what he meant, he turned and walked away. 2 hours later, I was pulled into an off-record debrief. Room B8, unlisted. A woman I hadn't seen before sat across from me. No name tag. Not science crew. Her posture was military. But not Navy. Something else. She wore a biometric badge with a waveform I didn't recognize. Her voice was quiet, steady, and never rose in pitch. "Have you experienced intrusive dreams since launch?" she asked. I hesitated. "No more than usual." She nodded once, as if logging the answer into an internal checklist. "Any motor memory inconsistencies? Sleepwalking? Unusual focus loss?" Define unusual. She looked at me like she already knew the answer, then leaned forward, hands folded. "Some of what we're receiving from V22 is not mechanical, not signal-based. It's affecting biometric telemetry, blood pressure, heart rate, basal neural rhythm, but not of the drone, of us." I frowned. "How?" She didn't answer, just tapped the table once and a waveform unrolled across the panel. It was my EEG from earlier that week. Overlaid on it, the incoming signal from the rogue packet. They matched, not perfectly, but closer than coincidence. "You're telling me that thing is syncing with human brains?" She didn't blink. "We don't use the word sync. The word is coherence." That night, I saw Thiel alone in the observation bay. He didn't hear me come in. The monitors were all off except one. A repeating loop of V22's last transmission, not the video, not audio, just that impossible grid, rotating, pulsing, shifting its dimensional logic, as if trying to find the angle that would let it slip through. Thiel was whispering something, over and over. I couldn't hear the words, but I recognized the rhythm. It was the same one Irina had murmured in the corridor, the same I'd started hearing in my own breath, deep at night, just before sleep took me, like a countdown I couldn't trace. On the 5th day, Irina passed me a note, folded into a datapad case, handwritten. "They're not from down there, they're from between." No signature, no follow-up. She refused to acknowledge it later. Cross began rewiring the acoustic bay without orders, said he needed tighter filtering, but I saw what he was doing. Bypassing the signal dampeners, letting more in, letting it grow louder. No one stopped him. That night, someone rerouted our ship's internal sensor grid. I noticed it when the hallway near the drone control room went dark again, but the motion sensors still tracked movement. Only the path logged didn't match anyone's physical position. The trace moved through walls, bent around bulkheads, paused outside my cabin door for 7 full seconds. I sat there in the dark, back against the far wall, tablet off, breathing shallow, waiting. It never entered. But the light by the door blinked 3 times, slow, intentional, like a signal returned. The next morning, the mess hall was silent. Not empty, just quiet in a way I hadn't felt before. No trays clattering, no idle talk. Just motionless people eating like they'd forgotten what food was for. I noticed small things. Identical bite rhythms. Elbows held at the same angles. Left hands clenched under tables. It wasn't choreographed, but it wasn't random either. At the far table, someone I didn't recognize was wearing Cross's badge. I walked toward him, but by the time I crossed the room, he was gone. No tray, no footsteps, just an empty chair and a heat mark on the table surface. I pulled the full archive of V22's handshake metadata. Just packet headers, no contents. Buried in the transmission logs were patterns I hadn't noticed before, spacing irregularities. Pulses that matched timestamps not from our clocks, but from biosensor logs across the crew. One spike coincided with Irina's moment in Corridor G4. Another matched the exact second I lost time in the ops bay, but one stood out. A packet logged before V-22 had even launched. Timestamp, 18 days prior. Location, Summerlids Dry Dock. The drone had already been speaking. Cross stopped sleeping, at least not in quarters. I found him once in the server core, hunched beside the optical routers, mumbling syllables that didn't belong to any language I knew. He didn't flinch when I called his name. Just kept staring at the rotating coolant fans, like they were whispering back. Next morning, he was clean-shaven, fresh uniform, no memory of the night before. When I asked about the server room, he just said, "What server room?" That evening, a message appeared in my cabin terminal. No sender, just text. Do not stabilize signal. It needs the variants. It auto-deleted after 6 seconds. I didn't screenshot it. I couldn't. The capture function was locked. But I remember the font. It wasn't standard ship UI. It was the same font used in Thiel's personal notes, the ones we were never meant to see. We received clearance to re-enter the western trench wall on day 7. The announcement came not from Thiel, but as an automated directive on our control terminals. No signature, no timestamp. Just a line of command text blinking over black. V-29, vector realignment approved. A7 periphery scan, engage. Thiel didn't comment. He just nodded slightly and left the ops bay before we could ask anything. I think he already knew we wouldn't like what came next. Preparation took 6 hours. We scrubbed every subsystem twice, replaced every connector on the stack, cross-swapped out the phase bridge entirely, saying something vague about harmonic bleed in the upper frequency band. He fitted the signal relay with a harmonic dampener he claimed would filter out unwanted modulation, though I could see in his eyes he didn't expect it to help. Neither did I. Even routine systems showed variance. Voltage drifted higher than it should. Minor, but consistent. Several microcapacitors in the guidance array discharged in identical patterns during testing. Impossible under standard load. I ran the numbers twice. It was like something external was anticipating the circuit flow, reacting before it should have been able to. The lighting in the bay started pulsing during diagnostics. No alarm was raised. Just a subtle flicker in the high-band LEDs, like the power wasn't fluctuating, but the time signature was. Before launch, Irina pulled me aside. She handed me a sealed vial. Cerebrostatic inhibitor, she said. Experimental. Won't stop it, but might delay it. If it starts to push, take one, not both, never both. I didn't ask how she got it. Her hands were shaking. I kept it in my boot. At 0520, we deployed V-29 on its longest descent path yet. No vector assist thrusters, no active sonar pulses, just pure gravity fall, aided by internal ballast trim. The descent was slower than standard protocol, but deliberate, almost ceremonial, like we were entering a place that required quiet. The trench had changed. Not the topography on the maps. We'd used the same bathymetric profile for days, but the trench itself. It was as if it had unfolded while we weren't watching. Angles bent inward. Proportions grew unstable. The groove that spiraled downward from the southern ridge was deeper now, more precise, less like natural erosion, more like the record of intention. At 9,800 meters, signal degradation began. The distortion wasn't random. It repeated in bursts, perfectly spaced like breath. A staggered rhythm every 23.2 seconds. Lateral static spilled across the video feed in thin diagonal strokes, as if the camera lens was being brushed by invisible fibers. I rerouted compression twice. It didn't help. The drone lights dimmed, not flickered. dimmed, slowly, measured. The photons themselves felt swallowed by something thicker than water. We crossed 10 to 100 meters. That's when the image inverted. Not a glitch, an event. The seafloor rolled upward. Orientation flipped. And for 3 seconds, the visual feed showed not trench wall, not rock, not silt, but light, points of it, arranged in curved formations, arcs overlapping and rotating like a mechanical orrery. I thought we were seeing stars, but they moved too slowly and too precisely. They weren't distant, they were near, observing. Then the feed snapped back. The trench returned, but our map no longer registered V29. Telemetry kept flowing. The drone was still broadcasting, but our navigation systems were blind. All triangulation failed. GPS came back null. Even the onboard gyros started stuttering. Frame drops in the inertial tracking loop. Movement became a guess. Then the drone drifted forward. I hadn't touched the control stick. I tried to lock the pitch vector. The interface accepted the input, but the drone ignored it. It maintained slow forward momentum toward a feature we hadn't mapped, a vertical incision in the trench wall. Its shape was unnatural, not formed, cut, no silt, no marine snow, just black geometry, a tunnel. The drone entered without command. Then we lost audio. Inside, only infrared worked. The walls weren't rock. They weren't even mineral. They had translucency. Light bled through them in soft gradients. The layering resembled growth plates, biological but inert, like cartilage fossilized under pressure. The beam width narrowed the deeper we went, not from loss of clarity, but as if the environment was compressing the data channel itself, compressing perception. Then came the pressure spike. The ship barometers screamed, which made no sense. We were above the surface. Yet everyone in the ops bay felt it, my ears clamped. Irina dropped to one knee. Cross staggered backward and emptied his stomach into a bucket that hadn't been there moments before. A static charge built in the air. Dust particles lifted from the console surface and hovered, held by nothing. Then the hum, not sound. It moved through matter, through us. Not a vibration, but an alignment. My teeth ached, my molars pulsed, my fingertips tingled like a low-voltage current ran through my blood. Then the shape appeared. Not on the video feed, but within it. The drone had stopped transmitting visual geometry. Instead, each frame became a different expression of something unspeakably large. The structure had no stable form. Sometimes it appeared skeletal, sometimes fluid. Other times as arrays of tessellating lines that seemed to bend away from the edges of perception. V29's depth sensor dropped into undefined space. The screen read, then something spoke. Not with language, not in audio. In me. It entered through the spaces between thought, through rhythm, image, pressure. It wasn't communication. It was communion. An awareness colder than water, broader than mind. My body disappeared. No ops chair, no screens, no self. Only pressure, a vast spatial pressure, like my thoughts were being rolled out over a surface too large to comprehend. I saw light that wasn't made of photons. I saw angles that connected nothing to nothing. A structure that resembled an eye, but not for sight. It gathered presence, not image. It was collecting, then nothing. I came back gasping. My vision collapsed into the ops room like a rubber band snapping. Alarms howled. Cross lay unconscious, face wet. Irina was bleeding from her nose and one ear. Her eyes were open, too wide, not blinking. I silenced the alarms manually. The feed was still transmitting, but it wasn't moving. One single frame held on screen, an image Not the trench, not the tunnel, the ops room, seen from above, us, our exact positions, rendered with impossible precision. But there was someone else. Someone standing directly behind my chair. Unidentifiable, genderless, featureless, too tall, too still. The image began to flicker, then corrupted. Thiel never came back, no status updates, no alerts. We checked his cabin. It was sealed from the inside, power disabled. Environmental status read green, but life signs returned null. Cross refused to speak. He isolated in his room and activated a deep loop stim lock. I could hear the oscillators through the door. He was flooding himself with white phase neural noise. Full blackout, nothing getting in. At 0322, Irina walked calmly into the drone bay. No authorization, no announcement. She manually keyed the winch system and launched V-30. There were no mission parameters, just drop. The tether unwound like slack being swallowed. The drone vanished without uplink. Then she walked straight toward the sealed corridor, labeled Zone 6B. I followed. The door wasn't locked. Inside, nothing. Not darkness. Absence. A perfect vertical cut into open void. She stood at the edge, looked over her shoulder once. "It's not coming from below," she said. "It's coming from the missing." Then she stepped backward and vanished. No sound. No fall. Just gone. The door sealed behind her. By morning, the clocks had fractured. Time passed unevenly between compartments. I recorded water drops from the faucet, 4 seconds apart, then 7, then none at all. A cup fell in the galley. 9 full seconds from hand to floor. No explanation. The mirror in my cabin developed a lag. When I raised my hand, my reflection paused, then followed, fractionally behind. I stopped using the mirror. The lights in the drone bay now flickered in patterns. Short, long, short, then pause, like code, but no one else acknowledged it. The final transmission from V29 came at 0614. It bypassed routing. It forced itself onto every active display, terminals, diagnostics, even medical sterilizers. The image was simple, a diagram, circular, symmetrical, rendered in impossibly precise lines. A blueprint, but not of anything we could build. Some components weren't materials. One was a waveform. One was something labeled recovered biology, genome unresolved. One wasn't labeled at all, just a symbol I couldn't describe. Not with language, not with shape. Below the image, 2 words. Phase 1. Then the lights dimmed. The ship fell silent. We haven't moved. But outside the porthole, the stars are no longer fixed. They spiral slowly. And I'm no longer certain which way leads to the surface, or if it still exists. I don't know how long it's been. The clocks still display numbers, but they no longer mean anything. Time has collapsed into behavior, patterns, repetitions, breaks in rhythm. I track duration now by phenomena. The frequency of static in the comms layer, the rate at which condensation forms on the inside of the viewport, how often I forget where I am, mid-thought. I'm not sure the others are alive. I haven't seen Cross since Irina disappeared. His cabin door is sealed from the inside. There's movement sometimes, shadows under the gap, a faint vibration like fingers tapping the floor in recursive patterns. But when I knock, there's no response. Only the tapping stops, then resumes, slower, like it's listening. There's something under the hull now. I can hear it in the ballast cavity, something brushing against the outer plating, not metal on metal, not scraping. It's soft, repetitive, like cloth being pulled across ribbed glass. It happens every 19 minutes. Exactly. I've tested it, timed it, tried ignoring it. But it's getting louder. I tried pinging Surface Command again, not that I expected a response, but routine has become a form of resistance. The system replied, not in words, in pulses. 6 of them, each 3 seconds apart. Then silence. Then the ship's internal lights dimmed, not simultaneously, but in sequence, from stern to bow, like something had moved through the vessel. Not above, not below, through. Afterward, the air felt heavier. I checked the O2 saturation, 20.9%, exactly normal, but it didn't feel normal. My chest ached with every breath, like the atmosphere had thickened, not compositionally, but conceptually, like breathing was a thing the space around me no longer approved of. The wall behind my bunk changed. Not physically, it's still metal, still riveted, still labeled compartment C3A. But the way it absorbs sound is different. When I speak, there's a second delay now. A ghost echo, but not of my voice. It repeats my words, yes, but the tone is wrong, flatter, like someone trying to sound human without having ever heard speech before. And the pacing isn't consistent. Sometimes it answers before I finish. Other times, it waits, as if thinking. Edmo Nahuba 13 shipboard time. I found a new file on my tablet. I didn't open it. I didn't create it either. No file name, no extension, just a gray square on the root directory. I opened it the next morning. It was a video. 2 minutes long, silent, footage from the drone bay, static camera, empty, then movement. Not human, not drone. Just a flicker of displacement at the edge of the frame, like the pixels themselves had been pushed aside to let something pass through. Then a shape formed in the air, barely visible, not occupying space exactly, but bending it, like a placeholder for mass. It turned once slowly, as if becoming aware of the camera. Then the screen went black, and my tablet crashed. A second vial appeared in my quarters yesterday. Identical to Arena's, cerebrostatic inhibitor, same label, same seal. But I never left my room, and no one entered. I checked the footage, nothing. But on frame 412, for exactly 0.3 seconds, there's an empty glove on the table. It hadn't been there before, wasn't there after. And when I blinked, I felt something grip my shoulder. No one was there. I went to the observation bay again. What's outside isn't ocean anymore. It hasn't been for a while. I think I knew that, but now I'm sure. There's no current, no pressure gradients, no particulate drift, just depth, pure abstract depth, as if the concept of outside has been stripped down to a single vector, away, no up, no down, just out. I saw something move against that depth, not toward us, not away, just beside us. But there is no beside. We're alone. Except we aren't. At 0641, the comms deck lit up for the first time in 3 days. Every monitor displayed the same sequence. No source, no routing header, just raw code, not binary, not machine readable. It was symbolic. Loops inside spirals, inside equations that seemed to rewrite themselves as I watched. Symbols layered in fractal recursion, impossible to parse, but visually magnetic, like they wanted to be seen. Then came the audio, not from the speakers, from inside my skull. Just one phrase. It remembers. What it is, I don't know. But I remembered something too. Something I hadn't lived. A corridor I've never walked. A voice I've never heard, calling me by name, but not the name I use. Later, I found Irina's tablet. It was tucked beneath the hydraulic manifold in the auxiliary junction. No one goes there. It's electromagnetically shielded, unscannable. The tablet had one file, a text log, 6 entries, each one shorter than the last. It speaks in structure. The signal was never outbound. V22 was only the first mirror, We thought we were receiving, we were being copied. Repetition is invitation. The missing aren't gone, they're overwritten. I don't know when she wrote them. I don't know if she did. The final timestamp reads 09:14 a.m., day 11. It's day 9. Or maybe it was. I don't check the clocks anymore. I've stopped writing logs the way I used to. Not because I've given up, but because I'm no longer sure who's reading them. Yesterday, I found a printout I didn't make. Same typeface, same format. My own wording, but not quite. Phrasing just slightly off. Like a bad translation of thoughts I haven't had yet. The timestamp was dated 3 days ahead, and it described things I hadn't seen, not until this morning. The page described a noise behind the galley bulkhead, like hands pressed against the inside of a sealed drum. I heard it at 04:07 exactly as written, 4 slow thuds, then silence, then a faint dragging sound. I haven't seen my own reflection in 2 days, not just lag. Absence. The mirror is clear, lit, but empty. It reflects the room, the cot, the desk, but not me. I tried using a spoon, then the polished wall panel in the comms hallway. Same result. I'm still here. I can feel weight, breath, motion. But something has decoupled. Like the feedback loop between perception and self has been unplugged. I catch myself checking my shadow just to confirm I still cast one. Most of the time I do, but not always. I ran a full diagnostic on the environmental system out of desperation. It should have returned the usual graphs. Pressure, humidity, temperature drift, particulate levels. Instead, I got a list of words. Just words. No measurements, no units, no context. Breathable, variable, partial. Then, on the last line, adaptive, yes. That last one sent a chill through me, because it meant something here is adjusting itself to us. Or worse, to me. A new door appeared on deck 2. I don't mean metaphorically. It was not there the day before, between the backup battery racks and the emergency vent lockers, where the wall used to be seamless. There's now a pressure-sealed hatch labeled OBS Prot O2B. I ran my hand along the frame. It's warm, not powered, alive. There's no access panel, no manual override, just a rectangular port, like a retinal scanner or a biometric intake. I stood in front of it for 10 seconds. The light turned green, but I didn't go in. I came back 4 hours later. The door was gone. The wall was smooth again. I think I've started dreaming while awake. I was sitting in the comms chair when it happened, monitoring the diagnostics, nothing out of spec. Then my vision blurred, not like sleep, more like too many images overlapping. I saw the ops bay, but not our ops bay. It was wider, older. The materials looked rougher, riveted steel, not composites. There were others there. Figures in partial pressure suits, helmets open, breathing. All of them turned toward the screen at once. I saw myself on it. Then the image fractured, not into static, into glass. Something on the other side was pressing forward, not a figure, a pressure, trying to remember its way through. Then I blinked, and I was back. My coffee had gone cold. Time had passed, but the system log showed 0 activity. I'm no longer certain the ship is real, not all at once at least. Some parts remain stable, main corridor, drone bay, galley. Others flicker. The forward bulkhead in maintenance now curves slightly inward. It didn't used to. The emergency locker on deck 1 has 2 hatches now. The stairs down to engineering sometimes have 13 steps, other times 15. When I speak aloud, sometimes the acoustics change mid-sentence, as if the shape of the room has shifted between words. One night, I opened my cabin door and found the drone bay instead, closed it. Opened it again. It was my cabin. I keep finding V-22 references in places it shouldn't be, printed on the inside of a pressure valve, etched faintly on the back of a relay screen, once embedded in the UI of the food dispenser. But the drone was lost. Years ago. Now it's speaking again, through systems, through architecture. I think V-29 isn't just receiving the signal, it's propagating it. We're inside a vessel that is becoming part of the transmission. Maybe we already are. At 0532, I found a segment of wall in the lower deck where my own thoughts echoed back at me before I had them. I stood there for 10 minutes, thought a phrase. "What are you?" And I heard it, before I finished forming it. Then a second later, another voice answered. It didn't speak in language, but I understood. Not from the trench. Then again, from the laps. Then the lights went out. I've sealed off my cabin from the network. I run no systems, no diagnostics, only analog notes now. Pen on old checklists, stashed behind panels. Because everything digital talks back. It's not just responding, it's questioning. I caught my tablet querying itself last night, looping strings of logic. If not ship, then what? If not you, then who? It didn't crash. It just stopped. Then started playing back a heartbeat. Mine, recorded, reversed. I'm not trying to leave anymore. There's nowhere to go. The outside isn't ocean. The inside isn't sealed. We're not inside a vessel. We're inside a pattern. One designed to run until something aligns, something opens, and whatever it opens to, it's not another place. It's a version of us, of what we were before contact, of what we'll be after, if there is an after, and if not, then maybe this is the loop beginning again. Maybe I was never the first. Maybe I'm already the copy. Maybe this is just phase 2. I don't remember going to sleep, but I woke up somewhere else. Not in my cabin, not even on the ship, I think. The architecture resembled human design, but only faintly. The proportions were subtly incorrect. The walls bowed inward with impossible symmetry, and the light wasn't coming from bulbs or strips. It radiated from the material itself, pulsing in frequencies I could feel rather than see, like it wanted to sync with my breath. It did. There were no seams, no corners. The air held a sterile clarity, as if it had never passed through lungs before. It tasted neutral, unauthored. When I moved, the space adjusted. Not physically, but perceptually. My steps didn't echo. They folded. My shadow didn't trail. It anticipated. Like the room wasn't waiting for me to arrive, but remembered me from something that hadn't happened yet. Then I saw the corridor. It hadn't existed a moment ago. Now it extended ahead like it always had. So I walked. The walls gently curved with the arc of my movement, adjusting their color temperature with each breath. A low subharmonic hum accompanied me. Not mechanical, not environmental, but biological. Like a respiration in slow motion. Eventually I entered the chamber. At the center stood the chair. It wasn't inviting. It wasn't even functional in the conventional sense. There were no controls. No input surfaces. Just the idea of a seat. Formed for a posture that was nearly human, but built for a spine that curved differently. Behind it, the image, the schematic. The same one V-29 sent, only now it wasn't a transmission, it was alive. It hovered, rotating with impossible balance, not floating in air, but suspended in meaning, a dimensional structure built from geometry, rhythm, and intent. Not a projection, but a memory being recalled into visibility. The layers had changed. New rings rotated against the original diagram. One bore inscriptions in negative space, symbols that weren't drawn but subtracted from the void. I recognized none of them, yet they stirred something under my cognition, an echo of understanding I hadn't earned. Below it, where it once read Phase 1, now pulsed, complete. I felt it before I read it. Something in me locked into place, and then, without prompt, something spoke. Not a voice, not even a message, but the shape of realization itself. You endured, signal integrity. It wasn't praise. It wasn't even addressed to me directly. It was like a record being played in a language older than sound. I tried to speak, but I had no questions left, just context. Because in that moment, I understood. We weren't exploring the trench, we were constructing a witness. And the structure was me. Then, sensation returned. Pain first. Familiar grounding, pressure in my temples, a tightness in the chest, then orientation. I was in the drone bay. Or something like it, but the dimensions were off. The walls too wide, the ceiling too low. No equipment remained, only the chair, now embedded into the floor. And on the wall, a glowing panel displayed 3 lines. Restore protocol selected, continuity verified, memory retention partial. There was a 4th line below. It blinked once, then stabilized. Identity loop ready. The air pulsed once like a breath that didn't belong to me, and then silence, not absence, readiness. Since then, I've stayed lucid only in bursts. Reality threads in, like a signal being manually tuned. I catch fragments, steel beneath my feet, the scent of insulation, the vibration of internal hull stress. But between those fragments, something else leaks in. A parallel, not a hallucination, not decay, more like a second version, one built from interpretation. The ship, if it still is a ship, is no longer fixed in function. Rooms change size, paths repeat, sound travels the wrong way down corridors. And every time I pass through a hatch, I'm not certain the space beyond it is what was there yesterday. I've stopped calling them rooms. They're expressions now, states, waiting to be resolved. I found a message scrawled in grease on the inside of the maintenance panel, behind the hydro relay. We are not inside a location. We are inside a decision. No signature, but I know the handwriting. It's mine. Or at least, close. Yesterday, I caught myself standing in front of the central comms terminal with my hand hovering over the input array, not typing, just waiting. The screen was blank, but I knew what it wanted to show me. Something not written yet. Something it was waiting for me to become. Because that's the pattern now. Not control, not research, not rescue, recursion. The drone was never the experiment. We were. This is the last part of me still attempting a shape. A record, a container, not for memory, for consistency. Because soon, even that will dissolve. I feel it, thread by thread, language unwinding, emotion folding into neutral logic, sense converting to pattern. And at the edge of that process, I feel a presence I no longer dread. Only recognize it isn't alien. It's what remains after identity runs out of time, after the surface is lost, after return becomes irrelevant. It is the signal, and I am almost ready, almost coherent. Outside, the stars aren't stars anymore. They rotate like symbols waiting to be read, each revolution writing something new into the dark. And in one of them, I saw us, not our bodies, our attempt. A brief flare of thought stitched into recursion, and then replay. Another version, another vector, and always the signal folding inward. Always the signal, becoming, always. Phase 2.